Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. This show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we will give you the real deal, not bias or spin, or the major media's politically correct opinions masquerading as facts. We will provide you opinions and we'll tell you when we do it. The show rejects doctrinal uniformity. This political disease is a terminal threat for our democracy. The anti-American mobs out there are not appeasable and they're not going away. You may not be interested in them, but they are interested in you. And their target is our country. Now for today's show. Josh Blackman is a law professor at South Texas College of Law in Houston. I've had him on shows before. He's always interesting and he's insightful as to what the Supreme Court key decisions are each term and what it means for like everyday Americans like us. So Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's go. Let's start. Most important decision of the term in your opinion?
Probably the tax return case is decided at the end of the year.
These are the Trump tax return cases.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of cases that affect social issues, but this actually affects the long-term interest of the presidency. And the court actually held that the state of New York City, can subpoena the sitting president's tax records. This was a huge holding.
Very important. Now, on the other hand, the second decision was told to Congress you didn't show probable reason for having the tax returns, so you don't get them.
Right. There were two cases. One where the Manhattan District Attorney sought the tax returns, and the second one where the House of Representatives sought the same documents. So the court split the difference. That Congress, you screwed up, you can't have them. New York, you can get them.
But it's not going to have any impact on the election, Josh, because they sent it back to the lower court to work out. So with appeals, it'll be after November when Trump's tax returns come in. And if he doesn't win re-election, who cares, right?
That's what's going to happen. We're not going to see these documents for a while, if ever.
I got you. Okay, next up, let's talk about the Louisiana abortion decision, which was actually a takeoff of the Texas abortion law that said abortion providers need to have admitting privileges in local hospitals. So tell us about this.
So you remember many years ago, almost a decade ago, the Republicans in Austin passed a bill saying that abortion providers must have admitting privileges to a nearby hospital. This was the bill that Wendy Davis filibustered with her pink sneakers, if you remember back in the day. We've not come very far. Several years later, the Supreme Court said that law was unconstitutional, that there's no health benefit to having doctors have these privileges. So the Texas law was put down. Louisiana had enacted an almost identical law, very similar law, that required admitting privileges. Now, Louisiana is a different state, it's smaller, their hospitals are closer together, so maybe there's some distinctions between Texas and Louisiana.
Yeah, I think we have a cartoon by Ramirez on this, because the most interesting thing for me about this decision, Josh, was that the Chief Justice, who voted to sustain Texas's abortion law, voted to overrule Louisiana's abortion law. Do we have that? And we'll see if it shows up, Josh. You'll see it on the screen. There it is. Roberts versus Roberts, because he's kind of flip-flopped between 2016 and today. So what's going on here with Roberts?
Well, in 2016, Justice Kennedy, the swing vote, was the fifth vote to kill the Texas law. Now in 2020, Roberts changed positions. He was against the Texas law, and now he's also, he voted that the Texas law was fine, but now he rules that the Louisiana law is not fine. And he suggested that this law has to go because of precedent. That is, the court has to stay with its 2016 precedent. But, and here's a big but, Roberts signaled that maybe in some future case he would not stand by this precedent. He cast a lot of doubt on it. So he likes having it both ways. You're sensing a pattern. He killed the Louisiana law, but I think he signaled that other abortion laws might survive in his court. So we're basically at this guy's mercy at this point. We don't know what the hell the law is until he tells us.
Fascinating. I mean, in law school, of course, when we were taught how important precedent was, but it's kind of like it's important for some of these judges sometimes, but not always.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's see. Next up, that you think is important. Oh, let's go to. I'm sorry, I know what I want to talk about. Let's talk about expansion of the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and I don't know what else. And basically opening up to gays, lesbians, transgenders, and people who don't have a gender at all. Because in 1964, all that was big issues. It was debated by the Congress, right? And they discussed it and they wanted it in the bill. Wait, I'm sorry, that's all wrong. This is, we have another Ramirez cartoon also. This is about legislating courts, is what I think it is. And there it is. The assault by the Supreme Court on the Capitol, because this is a decision, Josh, in my mind, that should have been made by the Congress. You know, I'm not saying do it, don't do it. I'm just saying Congress needs to start doing its job and not depending on the courts. What do you think the significance of this decision was?
Well, in '64, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, which said that businesses cannot discriminate against people on the basis of sex, because of their sex. Now, what's that phrase mean, to discriminate against them because of their sex? For 50 years, every court in the United States thought that meant because of biological sex. But the court said that they were all wrong, that the words they chose were broader than their intentions. They may have only intended to prohibit biological sex discrimination, but they used different words. And the words they used would allow claims based on sexual orientation and gender identity, that a person's sexual orientation is an ingredient in sex discrimination, that a person's gender identity is a factor in sex discrimination. Therefore, what we didn't know, now we know. And nationwide in all 50 states, it's a violation of federal law to fire someone or to discipline someone because of their sexual orientation or gender identity.
Interesting. I mean, if you study the legislative history of the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, you would not see any of those distinctions mentioned as who they wanted to cover. So I guess this is... Go ahead.
The court said that doesn't matter. What matters is the text of the statute, not their unenacted intentions, which is very different from how courts have read statutes before. But this is Justice Gorsuch, one of new members, telling us the right way to read statutes.
So this is part of the, we decide what's important when we decide the decision. I often get a feeling, Josh, that some of these decisions that these higher courts make, like the Supreme Court, they kind of decide where they want to go first, then they write the opinion. I may be missing something, but it sure seems that way. Okay, what else we have that came out this session that is important?
Well, we had a case about the Electoral College. This one's actually very significant. You may recall in 2016, there were a bunch of electors who picked the president who they didn't want to vote for Trump, and they tried to vote for someone else, and they were encouraging people nationwide to vote for somebody else. This could throw the entire election into chaos. If, imagine Trump wins Texas, maybe, but the electors decide to go vote for Joe Biden, right? The Supreme Court said that is not permissible, that the states can basically instruct and punish the electors and force them to vote for whoever wins their state. This ruling could have thrown the entire political process into chaos. If you imagine all these people voting against Trump if he'd win the election, it would have been pretty awful.
Was this was a 9-0 vote by the Supreme Court?
9-0, they all agree that the electors don't have independence from the state governments.
Very interesting. So that really kind of strengthens what we believe to be the traditional role of the Electoral College.
Exactly.
At least in the modern era. Okay. What else, Josh? What else did they do to us?
Well, there was a case involving Oklahoma, and this is a bit of a messy case. In the 1830s, the federal government reached a treaty with Indian tribes in Oklahoma, and they said, you will have this land forever. Okay, well, that was one of many promises that was broken over the years. But Congress would chip away at the reservation, but never formally killed it. So the question was Eastern Oklahoma still part of an Indian tribe? And virtually everyone for a century thought that no, this was part of the state of Oklahoma. Justice Gorsuch writes an opinion, and he actually says, and this is stunning, that Eastern Oklahoma, including the city of Tulsa, is actually part of an Indian tribe.
So a lot of people living in Oklahoma live on tribal land.
They had no idea. This ruling has such momentous consequences for an entire state. It's hard to even decide. It's a stunning ruling. And this is Justice Gorsuch again saying, we don't care what Congress intended, all we care about their words. This sort of literalism, which creates staggering consequences.
Fascinating. Okay, then we had a number of religious freedom decisions.
Yes, let's get to those. Well, the big one was called Espinoza. This was a case from Montana. Montana had a policy where they would give money to private schools. Seems like a good policy. But the state Supreme Court said, no, you cannot give money to religious schools, only secular schools. That was what their state constitution required. And the Supreme Court said that, no, that's not permissible, right? To discriminate on the basis of religious status is religious discrimination. You can't penalize schools because they're religious. If you give money to some schools, you have to give it to all schools. So this was a huge decision which will have a lot of implications for school choice and the like. The idea that parents can send their kids to whatever school they choose, and the states can provide vouchers or credits to allow people to go to those schools. This was a hugely important decision.
And then we had the Little Sisters of the Poor back in the Supreme Court.
Oh,
again.
the poor sisters. They've been snared with Obamacare for nearly 8 years. It's been going on forever. And once again, the court punted. They said, well, we're not going to decide if their religious liberty is being violated. We just decide that, the Trump administration was able to change the rules. Guess what? If Biden comes into office in a few months, he'll put the sisters back under the same sort of requirement they were before. So we'll be in the exact same position we've been in since 2013. It's stunning. The court, when the cases go left, they decide big issues. When the cases go right, the court, incremental, little bitty steps. So there's never like a decisive win for conservatives. It's always sort of this incrementalism. But when it's a liberal win, man, they run the table.
So if Joe Biden wins in November, the Little Sisters of the Poor at some point will be back in the Supreme Court?
Yep, they're still there.
Can't make it up. Okay, did we cover all the highlights, or we got some more you want to talk about?
I think the only other case that's big was the Daca case. You might
that
remember that President Trump tried to wind down this immigration policy for these young immigrants. Obama enacted it through an executive action, and then Trump tried to terminate it in the same way. The Chief Justice said, no, you can't do that. You didn't jump through enough hoops. You didn't consider the right factors. Go try it again. And of course he's not going to try it again. We're now 4 months from the election. It's ridiculous. But this is how the court rules. They say, well, you can do it, but you didn't do it the right way. Try it one more time.
Well, isn't it true, Josh, isn't it true that the Obama administration didn't do it right either? It wasn't an executive order.
Look, and the court said it doesn't matter how it was enacted. What matters is how you're rescinding it. So we're stuck with a policy that President Obama enacted by himself. 8 years ago. 8 years this policy is in the books, and the court still hasn't resolved whether it's legal or not. Bitty baby steps.
Well, and again, this goes back to the failure of Congress doing its job. Because if Congress wants to pass a DACA bill, they should pass it. But for some reason, we can't get nothing done, which I guess is the problem that the court steps in areas where the politicians don't wander in or won't wander in.
I agree. We're stuck in this loop forever until Congress gets its act together.
Well, Josh, it's of course it's always fascinating to talk to you and to get your review of the important court cases, and you always do a good job of explaining it in terms that everybody understands. Good luck going forward. I hope that you get out of your house at some point and get a haircut.
I'm stuck here. You can see my hair keeps growing. I almost don't fit in the frame.
And we will be back after these messages, Josh. Take care.
Thank you.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com. Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection. Only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland, your host, and our guest in this segment is David Mitcham. David is an outstanding attorney. He was a noted criminal defense attorney for years and years, and then got recruited to become a prosecutor, lo and behold, in his golden years. So he is now the first assistant district attorney in Harris County, one of the largest DA offices in the country. And we're privileged to have him here to talk about criminal justice in this country, and we'll get to a little local stuff toward the end. So David, what's the state of the criminal justice system in America in this COVID world we're living in?
It's in a state of flux, Gary. I would say flux is the word that comes to mind.
Okay, so basically in every major metropolitan area in the country, the courthouses are essentially not fully operational. Is that a fair statement?
Very hard to function in criminal jurisprudence without being able to assemble a jury. And you can't very well assemble a jury under the conditions prior to the pandemic because you don't have enough for social distancing. Then you've got additional problems of juries having to be able to see the witnesses and be able to assess their credibility, so they can't very well be wearing masks. So you've got dual problems in terms of just going forward. Here locally, we've got our dockets are turning into like a pig in a python.
Explain what that means to...
Well, it means that we've got so many cases coming in that are not resolved because of the infrastructure problems and the problems associated with the pandemic. And so crime continues. I mean, really, the pandemic has been just a minor slowdown for the criminal element, but in terms of being able to dispose of the cases in a proper constitutional manner, it's become significantly problematic for the courts.
Yeah, and because social distancing being one, you got to be 6 feet away. We're about 6 feet away. But in a jury box, everyone sits next to you. You have 12 people sitting next to each other. Yeah,
it won't work. They're going to have to come up with some other procedure. Now, technology has been helpful. This Zoom technology has enabled the system, at least here locally in Harris County, and I imagine in other jurisdictions, to be able to function somewhat. But the criminal justice system, in large measure, is the inflection point are jury trials and the threat of a jury trial and the prospect of having to meet a jury of one's peers has a tendency to focus the mind and resolve cases. And that's how cases are concluded. It's with the threat of a jury trial. If you don't have a credible threat for a jury trial, there's the incentive to resolve the case is substantially diminished.
Yeah, that's basically where we're at. Has there been a jury trial in Harris County since late February of 2020?
I have heard rumors of a civil case that they attempted to do it recently. I don't know if that was apocryphal or not.
Oh, actually, I heard about that case, that it was a train wreck, because you'd have people take phone calls during the trial, right? You'd have people leave, or go to the bathroom, go to get a snack. It's
casual.
Real casual. So that is the problem. So as a prosecutor, does that change the attitude that your office or a prosecutor's office would take in terms of accepting or not accepting criminal cases from civilians or from the police?
Well, we will proceed with cases if probable cause is established, and we will go forward on cases where there's adequate evidence to do so. We're under constitutional requirements to go forward when there's probable cause that a crime has been committed. And so we are dedicated to our mission, but our mission is hampered by the present conditions. There's no question about that. And the district attorney's office, as I imagine across the country, it's similar. That we are practical institutions in terms of trying to resolve these controversies in an expeditious manner. And it has become more challenging, significantly more challenging, as a result of this peculiar virus.
Well, let's, because our viewers may not have, obviously, most of them don't have the insight as to how the criminal justice system in America basically works normally, not in the era of COVID-19. And in fact, you talk about COVID-19 in Harris County and in Texas, there's now talk about going home, shutting it down again, shutting down the state. If that happens, I'm sure that creates even further complications for your office.
It will certainly do that. And I guess that will be a function of just how bad it gets down here. And so, yes, it creates all manner of problems, and it's difficult for law enforcement, it's difficult for the defense bar, it's difficult for the prosecution, it's difficult for the judges.
So typically how cases work, there are regular court appearances for the defendants. Every month, every 6 weeks, they go to court. They get a chance, if they're in custody, they get a chance to see their lawyer sees the prosecutor in person. They can exchange information. There can be some discussion about resolution of the case. That's the old way. The new way is, well, maybe you contact, the prosecutor reaches out to you, maybe they don't.
Well, one of the things we were able to do, the district attorney's office here in Harris County was impacted significantly by the flood, our 500-year flood, Harvey, and one of the derivations in terms of our operation.
That's coming up on 3 years.
It's coming up on 3 years. That's exactly right, and we still haven't fully recovered from the flood, and then the panic set in with the pandemic. But in the meantime, our office did functionally go digital, which is really the saving grace in terms of being able to continue to seek justice.
So when you say digital, what do you mean?
Well, I mean we can do it by giving discovery to the defense. In other words, the evidence that we have that we're required by law to provide to the defense, we can now do it through what's called a portal on the, I guess, the internet, and through that we're able to communicate both with the courts and with the defense bar and with the witnesses. So we are still functioning, and technology has been a blessing in these trying times. But the technology is still fairly new, and the problems are gigantic.
And y'all are still out of your offices.
Right. We're not back in the
ago.
courthouse. We were in an office building a mile and a half from the courthouse, which creates its own logistical problem.
And the judges are not all fully operational in their courts, are
No. Some of them, some more than others, but none of them are up to 100%. They're working diligently, I'm sure, but the problems associated with this particular type of pandemic has really thrown a monkey wrench in the judicial system and the criminal justice system.
And which was still recovering from Harvey, as you said.
Exactly.
That's pretty scary. So cases are dragging on longer.
Cases are dragging on longer. That's not good for the victims of crime or the people that are accused of crimes or the system as a whole. And inordinate delay creates its own form of injustice.
It does. And so your numbers just continue to go up in terms of cases that are pending.
In large measure, that's true. But like I say, we are able to communicate with the defense bar, and we have been able to resolve some of the cases. So we're doing the best we can under trying circumstances. But the very fact that you cannot have an effective threat of a jury trial creates all kinds of problems in terms of having the cases get resolved. Judge Poe, a judge that you and I practiced before many years, made the observation that it's not jury trials that move the system; it's the threat of a jury trial for both sides. But as whoever's got the stronger evidence is more likely to want to proceed to a jury trial, and the one with the party with the weaker evidence becomes skittish at the prospect of a jury trial. And many times the parties can come together given the threat of the jury in the hallway and the footsteps therein.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
You and I both experienced that, yes.
Even in civil cases, it happens at times where people decide, I don't really want to do this.
Right. Yeah, I don't really want to see the whites of the eyes of the jury.
We settle for X, it's fine, I can live with it, and we move on.
Yes.
Let's talk about bail reform. This is big in the news. I mean, there's a big federal lawsuit in Houston pending before a federal judge where those who empty the jail of nonviolent misdemeanors now want to empty the jail of violent offenders. Because, I mean, I think our county jail's down in Harris County, Texas, down to about 6,000 or so.
Well,
people.
no, as of last week, it's about 8,000.
All right, so we're at 8,000. How would you characterize who's left in the jail?
Well, we've already, by and large, provided avenues of bail or bond to those that would qualify as nonviolent offenders are charged with those offenses. Generally speaking, the people we have in jail are in there for a reason. The nature of the offense, the history that they bring with them in terms of prior misconduct is taken into consideration, and the criteria that's being used has made it clear, and the criteria was devised primarily out of the governor's office, is what's being utilized in federal court, saying that if a person is charged with a crime of violence, they should not be provided a PR bond. Now we're talking PR bonds, a free bond, right? Or if they have violence in their history or sexual assault or something of that nature. Also, you take a look at their willingness to show up in court when they're supposed to.
Yeah, because the experience in misdemeanor court is a lot of the people that are given these free bonds don't ever show up.
That's true. The primary problem that we're having with the bonds is the recidivism, active recidivism while on bond, that an individual will be on bond and given a PR bond, and before you get him into court, he's picked up another offense and they get another PR bond. And so that has a tendency to make the defendant feel, well, what's the deterrence to all this? And we're seeing cases where people are facing 4, 5, 6 different episodes of criminal conduct, but they're given either personal recognizance bonds, PR bonds, or negligible bonds. And that's created problems associated with it.
Do you think that there are those in Harris County, because this is where you're best familiar with, that don't care about public safety? Public safety be damned.
Well,
get everybody out of jail.
I do think that different individuals that are engaged in the system have a different take on the importance of public safety. There is one school of thought that doesn't take it into consideration at all, and they press forward. And within our adversary system, that's tolerable if you have another point of view that can go into the arena, and then you have a neutral magistrate to make the decision.
Yeah, to argue the other side.
Right. So it has worked out in the past. It's worked out better in the past in some circumstances.
In fact, we've had some people that were released in Harris County on multiple free bonds out of misdemeanor court that ended up committing serious felonies.
That's exactly
killing people.
Right. That is exactly right. And what it ultimately turns out is more crime. And at a certain point, you reach kind of a critical mass on that, and it becomes a terrible problem. And we're flirting with that now in Harris County. It's an ongoing process.
There are the politicians. I call them the politicians. You're not a politician. You're a prosecutor. But the politicians who are leaders in Harris County, Texas, all Democrats, seem to want to empty the jail. Am I missing something?
Yeah, you're missing 2/3 of the Democrats because Kim Ogg took
The district attorney.
the district attorney of Harris County was in a four-way race and took 55%.
That's
And
significant.
that's the Democratic Party. That's the mainstream of the
So she took
Democratic Party.
55%. Let's talk about that against significantly more leftist opponents.
Well, two of the three were to the left.
who
One
wanted
of
to,
them,
criticized her as being insufficiently leftist as the prosecutor. Is that
right,
fair?
right, and she's dedicated to seeing that justice is done as opposed to dedicated to any particular
And-
ideology.
And she campaigned on public safety being an important consideration too, that she would not ignore as prosecutor. Some of her opponents were,
Right.
doesn't matter.
But my point is one of her opponents could be construed to have been to the right of Kim, and that took 10% of the vote. So if you take that 10% with the 55 she had, it's roughly 2/3. It's about a 2/3, 1/3
So that could be the
split.
silent Democratic majority that also supports law and order.
That's exactly right, although I don't think they will remain silent for long.
Well, I would hope so. So, of course, you deal with the Houston Chronicle, which is the local opinion paper. It's not a newspaper.
Well,
They
the
haven't
Chronicle's
covered the
very
news in a
opinionated, I'll give
while.
them that.
And they have worked your office over on a regular basis, saying you're insufficiently forthcoming in terms of getting people out of jail. I mean, they've criticized your office for everything. But let me give you a chance to kind of outline what and Kim was one of these. Well, she's long time, Kim Ogg, the prosecutor, she's a long time prosecutor.
She was for
You and I-
7, 8 years.
You and I
early.
dealt with her.
Right.
She was actually a really good prosecutor.
and I-
she was. She kicked our butts a couple of times.
I know that's right. I don't know if you recollect because it's been quite a while, but for about the first 4 years of the 80s, from 88 to 84, I was a prosecutor under Johnny Holmes.
I remember that.
And then my career more or less has been elliptical. Started out with the DA's office and came back.
Well, at a much higher level, Dave.
Well,
And then Kim ran Crime Stoppers.
she did, and she was the gang task force
For the city of
director
Houston?
for the city of Houston.
So she has a long history of being in law enforcement.
Indeed, but she also was on the defense side as well. She has a broad perspective.
So we're down to 3 minutes.
Okay.
What are the
Well,
major
what are
accomplishments?
some of the things that
what
we've
do y'all
done?
think that
All right.
you're proud of?
Well, all right.
Most
Two of the
proud
biggest
of.
issues that we confronted when we came into office were the issues that confront all of criminal jurisprudence. One is the war on drugs hasn't turned out as well as we'd hope, and especially as it pertained to low-level marijuana busts. And so the first thing that she did when she came in is she instituted the misdemeanor marijuana diversion program, where a person can avoid getting arrested even if they are suspected of being in possession of marijuana, and they're offered the opportunity to take a program for them to reconsider some of their life choices, and that will it cause the case never to be filed, and they would be able to get out of all that without a criminal record, and they'd still be employable. And so we've addressed the issue of the war on drugs.
would you say it's been a success?
I
this
would say
program?
it's been a tremendous success.
People don't come back in the system.
It saved the county all kinds of money. The hidden costs of busting
Right.
an individual and giving them a criminal record and making
Probation,
them all of
yeah.
that. It's hard to calculate, but it's been a big leap forward. And then mental health. One of the problems that we've experienced here in Texas is that the legislature has basically shirked off its responsibility to people that are suffering from mental diseases or defects that affects their behavior, and they've criminalized a lot of mental health issues. And so we were instrumental in getting the Ed Emmett Diversion Center set up to handle some of these mental health issues. So there's an alternative to taking the individual that has mental problems, an alternative from the Harris County Jail. So that's those two issues Kim Ogg addressed and dealt with on a practical level, and had a real impact in terms of how people live in Houston and in Harris County. Additionally, we're victim centric at the district attorney's office. We expanded the number of victim coordinators, and that's someone that's charged with the responsibility in each court of talking to the victims of crime and explaining the system to them, making them aware of what's going on as more or less a liaison with our
otherwise they're
office.
in the dark.
They are.
Yeah.
They're like the forgotten individuals, and they have the most skin in the game in a lot of instances. Well, when we came in, they had 6 such coordinators. We've expanded that to 24, and as a result, the previous administrations were handling about 1,200 cases a year in terms of helping the victims. We've got it up to 14,000.
That's the most impressive. Well, David, unfortunately, our time is up. But impressive accomplishments, and to be fair, your boss is running for re-election in the fall, right?
My boss is running for
Should be on
re-election
the ballot
fall.
in Harris County.
Kim Ogg for district attorney, yes.
As a Democrat, but straight ticket voting's gone, David.
That's
so,
exactly right, and we anticipate some of our Republican friends will be supporting her as well. We have broad support.
An analysis of her last victory showed she did really well with Republican women.
It's because that she is a mainstream Democrat and a reasonable person, and the voters recognize that, and we look forward to November.
Well, David, God knows we need more people like that from both parties. Well, David, thank you. We'll be back after these messages with our next guest, Gary Birnberg. We'll be talking about politics today, what's going on politically in the country.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is with Gary Polland, and my guest is Jerry Birnberg. Jerry Birnberg is a distinguished lawyer in the Houston area and the former chairman of the Harris County Democratic Party, now the dominant political party in Harris County. Many people say this all happened because Jerry Birnberg laid the groundwork for that, and he's a keen observer on political trends and what's happening in the country, and he tells it like it is. That's why we have him on the show. So, Jerry, first I want to tell you we're 113 days till the November election of 2020.
Really? What are we going to be voting for?
Yeah, well, that is a good question. We're in week 19 of the COVID quarantine, so because I think they're kind of related. So, let's start nationally. We have President Trump running for re-election.
No kidding.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I don't know. And Joe Biden, when he comes out of his basement, is running for president at an age that's, well, we got two guys in their mid to late 70s.
Almost as old as you and I.
No, actually, we got more going for us, I think, at this point than both of them. But the question I have for you is, how did we end up with the choice we have? Think about this. In a country that's now very diverse, where we got all kinds of people want to run for president. I mean, the Democrats this time had, 20 candidates at one point? 4 years ago, the Republicans had all these candidates. We end up with Donald Trump, first-time candidate, businessman. This time we end up with Joe Biden, career politician, been in office forever, and that's the choice.
That's the choice. No question that's the choice. But as I've gotten older, Gary, I've gotten cynical. And my cynicism tells me that one of the things that's happened over the last 4 or 5 or 6 or maybe a few more years than that is I begun to question the fundamental premise of democracy, which is that we're smart enough to figure out who our leaders should be. I'm not sure that's such a correct assumption, all things considered. But the truth of the matter is, I think what we have learned with President Trump, being nice about it, is that president is not entry-level politics. And on the other hand, with Joe Biden, I think that what we've learned is that there comes a time that people are wanting to turn the page and move to new ideas, fresher ideas, and those sorts of things. And so there are weaknesses on both sides. There's a lack of enthusiasm on both sides, except some degree of enthusiasm for not voting for particular candidates, or I should say, instead of voting
So we're
against
down to
them.
the point where I'm not for anybody, I'm against somebody, and I'm going to vote against whoever that person might be.
Yeah, but I don't think it's just that we've gotten there recently. I think that's been the case for way too long. I think there was an aspirational election in 2008 when Obama was on the ballot. And people somehow or another, including Republicans, I should say, had some sort of a feeling, aspirational feelings that maybe the country has turned the corner. Maybe we've gotten someplace that we've been trying to get to for a whole long period of time. And then 2010, you'll recall the emergence of the Tea Party and Obamacare and all of those sorts of things. And what really has happened, I mean this sincerely, what really has happened is the tribalism has become more acute. The partisanship has become more toxic. And politics is no longer a matter of folks working together to try to reach accommodation and try to find middle ground. Instead, for a lot of reasons that include everything from redistricting to mass media and social media, we've just gotten where we don't like each other anymore. And
Well, I think
that's
that's true.
devastating.
It is, and if you look back in history and you go back, you had Reagan and Bush, and you had Clinton, and in those eras there were periods after elections where both parties worked together. We know Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill, Bush worked with the Democrats, Clinton gets in and the Republicans take control. He worked with Newt Gingrich. I mean, you would think, how could Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich agree on anything except extracurricular activities with women, as they were both involved in? So they have that commonality. But besides that, how could they agree on anything? Yet they agreed on public policy, just like in those other areas, when we weren't in the election season. So what's changed? I think it happened under Bush too, because the controversy over the victory in Florida, the Democrats feel like they were cheated. Bush, who had a history of bipartisanship in Texas, goes to Washington and basically is told by the Democrats, Pelosi and others, to go stuff it. You know, you're not a legitimate president. And so they never work together. And so that builds up resentment, right, among Republicans. You didn't treat us right. And Obama wins. And part of Obama's victory was, well, gee, we broke the glass ceiling, you know, and that's a major step forward for a racial neutral country. We were elected an African American. But Obama, at the end of the day, was as partisan as could be, and he didn't want to work with the Republicans, and they didn't want to work with him. So you have the majority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, after Obama takes office, saying, my number one goal for the next 4 years is to defeat Barack Obama. So you ask yourself, what happened to the period where we legislate and set politics aside? And the short answer, as you said, it's gone.
Yeah, and I must say, my own sense of history is it may have started even earlier than that. The name that kept coming to mind while you were explaining your view of history was Robert Bork. When for the first time the presidential, exactly, a president's nomination to the Supreme Court of the United States met partisan resistance. And by the way, the leader of that partisan resistance to Bork was Joe Biden. And so kind of what comes around goes around, comes around. But
Yeah, and I think it's all that. But it's almost
but I
like
think it goes back
these
that
childish
far.
games. So the childish games are back to you. That's the kind of stuff you would do when you were in elementary school.
And the phrase that I use that I believe is the most damaging right now to the state of politics in the United States is the criminalization of of politics. Where are you going to get good people to run for important office when they know that an inevitable feature of being in office is somebody's going to try to indict you? Somebody's going to try to get the criminal law to come after you.
That's awful.
And that's exactly the effect of that is it's like, hey, who needs it? Why should I get
and then
engaged in that?
with the social media and major media personal attacks
Right.
that come to people, and it's regardless of party. It happens to both people in both parties. People are saying, what do I need this aggravation for?
Correct.
Why am I going to run for office to have my name bandied about? I'm going to be accused of being a serial adulterer, a thief, an abuser, a child abuser. I mean, you name it. And of course, one of my favorite stories I used to tell candidates as the party chairman here, and you probably did the same, was you're going to run for office. I want to tell you, they're going to look into your background. If they find anything that's not good, they're going to attack you. If they don't find anything, they'll just make it up. And that's reality.
Yes, it is. And I wonder if you had this experience that I had, and that is when people wanted to run for judicial office, I'd say to them, why do you want to run? The answer frequently was, well, because I'm so much a better lawyer and I would be so much a better judge than whoever is the incumbent or whoever is my opponent, to which my response invariably was, so what? What do you think that has to do with winning a judicial election?
Nobody knows anything.
It's got nothing to do with how good a judge you are, how good a lawyer you are, or how good any of those sorts of things. That's not how we select, certainly not how we select judicial candidates or judicial officers anymore.
That's another project.
And
we're going to do a show just on that,
Okay,
Jerry,
fair
on how
enough.
to pick judges, because we've done, as voters, I would say, generally speaking, in a lot of instances, we've done a poor job of picking the worst and the dumbest from both parties to get on the bench. By the way, they're great judges from both parties that have served in Texas.
That's correct.
But we have some dogs.
The real problem that we have is in Harris County, we've got so many judicial officers we're voting for that there's no way that either you or I, and we're pretty sophisticated both politically and legally, can know who's the best of those two candidates, or even who those two candidates are.
Right.
And if we can't figure it out, how do you expect the ordinary voter to be able to do it? It comes down to things like, do I like your name? Look, if you're going to run in Harris County, the best thing to do is to run as a color.
Right.
And by that I mean, if you're a green, a Gene Green or an Al Green or
That's a good name.
That's a good. How about a Brown? You got Peter Brown. Chris
Susan
Brown.
Mark Brown. Right.
Exactly. Or a White. You had Bill White.
Yeah.
It turns out that
Always
if
the
you run as a color, you've got a good chance of winning.
It's pathetic.
But that's
So what reforms do we need to institute to get our political system, to have the political system you would think a democracy deserves?
part of it. I mean, we were just touching on it. Now, you'd rather do this on a different show, but I will suggest to you that we need to quit electing judges. We need to come up with a different and better system, and I'll come back and we can talk about some of the ideas for how that happens. But look, if you can take that 70 or 80 positions off the ballot, now we can concentrate on the state legislatures and legislators and other elected
county
officers.
officials, right.
And then we perhaps can introduce better matrices of quality and get into debates about policy and those sorts of things if we can just clear the field so we get rid of the cluster. I think that's
That
one
makes
of the
it a
things.
simpler ballot.
Right, exactly. I think another thing that we need to do is honestly, we need to refine the way in which we elect, the systems of elections. I'm very concerned about this November, not just the implications of the coronavirus, but the implications of what's going to happen in Harris County in a November presidential election with the old voting machines that we have and with the absence of straight party voting, which I'm not talking about the merits or lack of merits of that. I'm talking about how long it's going to take to vote. So used to it taking a minute, 2 minutes to vote. Now it's going to take you on average 8 to 10 minutes to vote.
I think people are going to skip a lot of the ballots.
So, well, that is going to be a result, or we're going to have 4, 5, and 6 hour lines on election day.
Terrible.
That's going to be destructive of democracy in ways that we have not even contemplated. So we have to find ways to deal with that problem and make sure that we can get the voting experience down to where it's a pleasant experience and not one that people dread. I think that will improve the quality of candidates that we get if it improves the quality of the electorate that we have voting for.
Well, that's true, and it would also be good if we had responsible media that actually was actually reporting news and not opinion. I call the Houston Chronicle an opinion paper, not a newspaper anymore, because there's no more news in there. Everything's opinion.
Is there a Chronicle anymore?
Well, it's still there. No. I mean, there's not much left, but it's still there. But that's true of all the major media. And one of the biggest problems I see that we have in the country is the tribalism has meant that everybody goes to get their opinions from the sources that confirm their biases and prejudices, and they don't hear the other side. I'm like you. I've always thought it was really important to read some of the ideas from the other side. I subscribe to a number of liberal thought magazines to see what their ideas are in public policy. And I will tell you, at times I found some ideas that I thought were really pretty good.
But I found most of those when I was reading them, and I found fewer of them when I'm watching them. And so what I find is, and I'll confess to this, I try to watch Fox News, and I can't. I can make maybe 45 to 90 seconds, and then I get so aggravated. Now, I'm going to guess that you have the same problem with MSNBC.
I can't stand MSNBC.
Exactly. And so the effect of all of that is that me and my tribe are watching MSNBC, and you and your tribe are believing whatever it is that those folks on Fox News are telling you.
I don't necessarily believe everything. I'm pretty skeptical on a lot of this stuff.
Okay, that was a cheap shot.
A lot of it is a lot of what you're getting is spin from both sides. So the problem, what's missing is we're not getting the facts. As there used to be objective facts, you'd be able to read in the newspaper. The opinion would be on the opinion page. That's all gone. That's all gone. And so
and the rest of it is that we're getting yes, that's correct what you're saying, but it's also that I'm getting a bias. I'm feeding my own biases, and the other folks like me are correct. That's right.
Well, on that thought, Jerry, our time is up. We will have you back. Your insightful comments are always important, I believe, to be heard.
I wish my wife believed that.
Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time and same place. You can email the show at Gary Polland at AmericanStarTV.com. You can get my bi-weekly newsletter, the Texas Conservative Review, by signing up for free at TexasConservativeReview.com. Remember, in the immortal words of President Reagan, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We preserve for our children the last best hope on earth, and we will sentence them to take the final step into 1,000 years of a new dark age. I'll see you next week.